So we briefly mentioned last week, and we have it throughout the whole series, that if matter came first, if that's the mindset, like the modern atheist thinks, it's assumed that that's an axiom. An axiom means a basic truth, not question. And we're going to talk about that in various ways throughout what we're going to do today. And if that's true, then any other interpretation is automatically excluded. So if your initial premise is that matter came first and there is no spiritual or divine or creative mind in the beginning, then that tints you towards one direction, if not towards another. An atheist, mind first is axiomatic. An axiom, of course, is something that's accepted without proof. If matter came first, then evolution is the only explanation. But if a mind came first, then just maybe there is a creator or a designer instead. Evolution is the mandatory way in which we got here only if it can be done without a deity, done without some supernatural power or a god. That's the only way that it can happen if evolution, if mind came first. In 1988, a Berkeley biologist, and that's his name down there, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, said that evolution is an axiom. In other words, that's what our first premise is. Evolution is an axiom from which systematic methods and concepts are deduced. And then he went on to say that taking evolution as an axiom requires that pre-existing systematic methods and concepts be reevaluated in that light. So we have to take everything after that. If we know that evolution is an axiom, if we know that mind didn't come first, but matter came first, we reevaluate everything in that light, which is exactly what's done. And another guy, whose name was listed down here, says that nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution. He was an evolutionary biologist, of course. And that led us in a couple of different lessons to talk about the fact that there is either one tree, like the evolutionist thinks, where down here some places the slime that came out of the pond that eventually came itself from either rock or gas or whatever, and then every little branch evolved after that, but it's all part of this one single piece early on in the evolution of life. Where on the other hand, this is opposed to the creation model that has many trees. There are cat kinds, and there are dog kinds, and bear kinds, and horse kinds, and they don't mix back and forth, which, by the way, is what we actually see in nature. Okay? A lot of what evolutionists, we've talked about this a little bit, explain as evolution is nothing more than macroevolution, which means that this kind of dog can become another kind of dog, not that this kind of dog can become a cat. All right? So we have all kinds of things that would point to this. One would be, of course, the irreducible complex things that we see in nature. And we see things according to their kind. We see variations of dogs. We see variations of chickens. We see variations of horses. And from what we talked about the last couple of weeks, I think that we see variations of man or monkeys, not a combination of both, even though that's not what the evolutionist wants us to believe. So we're going to watch a video that has to do with this. In fact, I've got like 4 videos today. They're mostly pretty short. And this is the first one. So let me get this turned up so people at home can hear it. And here we go.
The universe displays incredible variety. Consider snowflakes. Every one is different. Every cloud is different. Every planet, every galaxy is different. This variety is just as visible among organisms. Every individual is different from every other individual. Every giraffe has a unique pattern. Every zebra has distinct stripes. Every dog has a distinct personality. And every human is different from every other. Despite all this variety, it's easy to see which of these belong in the same group. As different as deer are from each other, we still recognize them as deer. As different as finches are from each other, we still recognize them as finches. The same is true of plants. There are thousands of species of orchids and thousands of species of grass, but we still call them orchids and grass. Modern scientists call each of these groups families. The Bible gives a clue about the origin of such variety. Genesis 1 says that God created distinct organisms after their kind. In fact, he uses this phrase, after its kind or after their kind, 10 times in the creation account. What does the biblical term kind refer to? It is possible that in most instances, these kinds are the groups of similar species that scientists recognize today as families. If so, God made an orchid kind, a grass kind, a deer kind, a finch kind, and many others. Within these kinds, he placed potential for amazing variety. The creation of similar things with differences demonstrates that God loves variety and God loves unity. The best explanation for this is God's very nature: God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. 3 persons in one, loves both diversity and unity.
So we're going to talk today about, and this is going to be the last one I think we're going to do on fossils. We're going to talk about 2, if we can get through them. The first one is one called Archaeopteryx. Anybody ever seen that in a science book anywhere? No? Have you? Okay, good. You probably have. No? Really? All right. It was discovered in 1861. Now compare that to when Darwin's book came out, The Origin of Species. They found it 2 years after he published that book. So it's an old fossil. It's been around a long time. By 1877, just a few years after that, they found a more complete specimen, and they found others since. So they actually have quite a few of these Archaeopteryx fossils that they found. This was huge at the time because it seemed to be the evidence that showed Darwin was correct. This bird had teeth, it had feathers, it had claws, and it had a tail. Seemed like it was a good missing link. Now, Thomas Huxley lived back at the time of Darwin. In fact, they called him Darwin's bulldog. He was the guy that went around promoting Darwin's book and Darwin's ideas. He spent a lot of time publicizing this particular fossil back when they first found it and promoting it so that Darwin's theory would gain acceptance. This fossil has been at the center of controversy, though, from the earliest time of the Darwinian thinking. It's been around a long time. It's been kicked around a long time, and I'm hoping that in the next couple of videos and what we're going to say, you're going to see that there are still, at this day, this is over 150 years later, there's people on both sides of the issue that say, it's just a bird, it's a missing link. And all of them that say that, they're on opposite sides of the fence, are scientists. Okay? So, watch this. This is about 2 minutes.
This is one, of course, has been an icon of evolution ever since it was.
I want to say that this guy, this guy, and I think, well, this guy for sure is an evolutionist, and he's promoting the fact that it is a missing link. All right, it's one of the guys you heard speak here a week or two ago.
This is one, of course, has been an icon of evolution ever since it was found in 1861, 2 years after Darwin's book came out. Archaeopteryx, the first fossil bird. And when people first, the Christians first try to deal with this, they say, oh, well, it's just a bird because it has feathers. And they ignore every other aspect of its anatomy. Okay? And if you look closely at that specimen, it's very much not like any bird you know. Okay? It has long, bony fingers. Know how many birds you know have long, bony fingers today? None, right? When you have chicken wings, that little portion of the bone that's all pointy that you never eat because there's no meat on it, that's their entire hand fused together, okay? And if you've ever had chicken thighs, right, the very back of the chicken has no tail bones left anymore because they're fused together and then the tail bones held by feathers. But this guy has a long dinosaurian tail and a dinosaurian ankle and teeth, which no living bird has, okay? So if you didn't have the feathers when it was first discovered, in fact, one of these specimens which had very faint feathers was mistaken for the dinosaur Constantinophus, which is the star of Jurassic Park. Okay? And so, without the feathers, this thing is more dinosaur than bird. And only because feathers, creationists have to fit it in their narrow category. It's got to be a bird because it has feathers. Okay? That's the way they think. But you look closer, it's very clearly a dinosaur with feathers early on. This is the wrist area of Archaeopteryx. This is a bone that they have in their wrist that's shaped like a half moon. It's a bone that causes them to be able to do this with their hand, which is the flight stroke. I mean, your arm goes to the bottom of the flight stroke, the wrist doesn't snap, and that's why the feathers go in full swing. And if you ever watched Jurassic Park, where the dinosaurs called Velociraptor, it's effectively Deinonychus, if you watch how their hands move, that's the same gravity motion they'll have, because the closest relative to birds among the dinosaurs you know would be Velociraptor. So they're very, very close to birds. In fact, when Jurassic Park 4 came out, we were all disappointed because they didn't put feathers on them, which we know they had. Okay? So there's that distinctive wrist sequence that all birds have and almost all the predatory dinosaurs have. Okay? And then their ankles, they have a very distinctive thing where their ankle bones, instead of having their ankle hinge as you do between your shin bone and your first row of ankle bones, their hinge is between the first and second row of ankle bones. Okay? Which are only found in that group of dinosaurs and in birds.
So, obviously, this guy is in the camp that it is a missing link. All right, he's an evolutionist. I believe he's an atheist, although I don't know that, I don't remember if I looked that up or not. But he's placing his evidence on long bony fingers, the tailbone is like what a dinosaur might be. The idea that there's feathers, although I've read that there are some dinosaurs that did have feathers. And then he mentions the ankle bone, of course. This is a guy who's going to take the opposite point of view on the same fossil. So listen to what he says.
The idea that birds might have lost the ability to produce teeth over time is no help to the story of evolution anyway, which is ultimately about how new forms, functions, and features came about, not how the loss of something occurred. In fact, all of the unique features evolutionists have cited as to why Archaeopteryx should be considered transitional have now been debunked. And it isn't just creationists that have countered that, far from being some kind of dino bird, Archaeopteryx was just a bird. And it may have had some distinct features, but it was similar to many of those flapping around today. For example, world-renowned evolutionary bird expert Alan Fiducia has spoken against the use of Archaeopteryx as a missing link, very disapprovingly, saying the following. Paleontologists have tried to turn Archaeopteryx into an earthbound feathered dinosaur, but it's not. It's a bird. A perching bird, and no amount of paleobattle is going to change that. However, despite the overwhelming evidence establishing Archaeopteryx as a true bird and not a transitional form, many evolutionists continue to present it as such. Unfortunately for them, a verified scientific discovery demolishes the idea of it as a missing link between dinosaurs and birds. You see, an admitted true bird was found, announced in Science News way back in 1977. Which dates, according to evolutionists' own methods, at 60 million years older than Archaeopteryx, which led researcher Professor John Olstrom of Yale to say, we must now look for the ancestor of flying birds in a period of time much older than that in which Archaeopteryx lived. Obviously, children can be older than their parents, And this is what likely fuels fiducia and other more honest evolutionists' vocal contempt and rejection of the continued use of Archaeopteryx to prop up this fallacious missing link aim. And what has certainly prompted fiducia to also quit. You can't be your own grandmother.
So, two main reasons. The feathers, well, I'm going to give you a couple extra reasons. But the other one, of course, is that they did find a bird, according to their own dating methods, that was 60 million years older. And I'll talk probably sometime in the future about the dating methods, which I'm not sure how much credence I give to them anymore. But given that would be correct, they found an actual bird that would have been 60 million years older than Archaeopteryx. So it can't be a transition. It would have to be something else. And what we have here is a couple of quotes from some people. Says, why is Archaeopteryx still being called the first bird incorrectly by the evolutionists? Because evolution-believing scientists have not found and confirmed fossils of admitted true birds, or have found admitted true birds, supposedly, that lived 60 million years before Archaeopteryx. The one scientist, bird expert that this second video mentioned is this guy here, Alan Fiducia. And he has been critical of how Archaeopteryx has been classified by other biologists. In other words, this guy is an evolutionist, but he says they're classifying the bird wrong. He goes on to say that why is a terrestrial, what does terrestrial mean? Means on the land, okay? Not flying. Why is a terrestrial creature, why a terrestrial creature would have a reverse toe, which is a feature of sitting on branches. So in other words, if you go back, and I'll see if I can show you that. See that right there? That reverse toe is what he's talking about. That reverse toe is in the fossil. And that is not a feature of something that walks on the ground. It's something that clamps to a branch. And he says that makes it automatically something that stays on a branch and would be a bird. He says flatness of claw tells if it is ground dwelling, but Archaeopteryx had a curved claw indicating indicative of perching behavior and possibly suited for climbing tree trunks. This is a bird expert. This isn't just any old guy. And he believes in evolution, but he says that they're wrong and they're labeling it incorrectly. Paleontologists have tried to turn Archaeopteryx into a earthbound feathered dinosaur, but it's not. It's a bird, a perching bird, and no amount of paleobabble. What does he mean by that? Paleontologist is the person that would study that sort of thing, and babble is like just babbling stuff that's not true. No amount of paleobabble is going to change that. Still today, there is much disagreement about Archaeopteryx. This is over 150 years later. If there's that much disagreement, do you think that it should be put in the science books? Remember the science book? It's right there. Okay? It's right there. They have to use what they got, even if it is not necessarily. Who was it that said if you can fool some of the people some of the time and whatever, and then the end statement was you can't fool all the people all the time? Well, it's a pretty famous statement. I don't remember who said it for sure, but the point I'm trying to make with that is that it's pretty easy sometimes to fool the masses if they don't know how to do the research and dig and find out where the controversies are. Okay, which is what I'm trying to show you, that there is still controversies on some of this stuff. And this is not where we should be starting anyway, with the fossil. Where should we start? What did we talk about last week, maybe the week before too? Where do we start? In fact, since the very beginning of this class. We start with whether or not we think that a mind caused this or whether inert matter caused all this. If there's a mind that caused all this, I don't have a problem classifying this as a species that's halfway in between, but it is a species of either bird or reptile. Doesn't matter to me. God made it that way. Or whoever the designer was made it that way. It doesn't have to be an evolutionary link. But I think there's enough evidence to show that these are not a for sure thing. In other words, there's a lot of people, even evolutionary people, that question whether or not this is a missing link, although it's still in the books. So the next one and the last one we're going to talk about in the fossil series here is the evolution of the whale. This is a big one right now. And until I started teaching this class this time, it'd been a while since I taught a apologetics class. I didn't realize just how big this one was now to the evolutionists. All right, this is huge. And we're going to see a couple of evolutionary people that are actually alive today. I've seen debates between other people and one of these guys quite a little bit. I've heard him speak. You can find the one guy we're going to talk about online pretty easily. But we're going to see how they interpret this series of fossils, and then we're going to watch another video that shows that this series of fossils can't be what they are claiming. All right? Darwin thought that whales came from bears. All right? And he did that because he saw bears, the black bears, swimming around for hours and hours and hours with his mouth open and catching things like a whale would, like insects, in the water. If the supply of insects were constant, if better adapted competitors did not exist, then I can see, this is Darwin talking, I can see no difficulty in a race of bears being rendered by natural selection more and more aquatic. In other words, they eventually more and more become in the water rather than on land, in their structure and habits, with larger and larger mouths, like a big whale has a huge mouth, till the creature was produced as monstrous as a whale. So Darwin thought that the whale evolved from the bear. But as you're going to see in these next couple of slides, next actually 6 slides, nobody seems to agree where the starting point is. This is what they think at the California Academy of Sciences. This is what they think at the University of Michigan Museum of Natural History. This is the guy, Pacasitas, that Carnegie Museum of Natural History thinks that the whale evolved from. This is the guy that Melbourne Museum, that's in Australia, thinks. This is what the American Museum of Natural History thinks the whale evolved from. Now, some of these may have, since I put this down, some of these may have changed slightly, but at least up to fairly recently, that's what they all thought. But then others think that they simply came from a hippo. Okay, that hippo was the first cause that ended up being a whale. Do you remember back when we talked about a watch implies a watchmaker? This was at the very first lesson. And in other words, if you look around at things that are made, it's kind of like Ronald Reagan's analogy: cook the big meal, invite over evolutionists, and say if they believe in a cook. All right? Same kind of idea. There's lots of different illustrations. This is the guy that they accredit to that first kind of line of reasoning back in the early 1800s. But then there is these 4 guys. Now they are called the 4 horsemen. Where do you think the idea of these 4 guys becoming the 4? Now I will tell you that all 4 of them are staunch atheists. So we're going to talk more about this guy up in the upper left-hand corner, Richard Dawkins, which is kind of become the face of modern evolutionary. He's kind of the spokesman nowadays. He's the one that's out front But these four guys, why would they call them the four horsemen? Any idea? Go back to Revelation. You got four horses, all right? They're different colors. They go through and they do all kinds of ravishing things. They're making that as a comparison to them being the four horsemen of Revelation and bringing down what everybody thinks is true, all right? With their evolutionary ideas. And this is a book that's about the four of them. So, this is a book by Dawkins, the one up in the upper left-hand corner, called The Blind Watchmaker. Where did he get that title from? It's not hard. Where did he get that title from? Okay? He's trying to destroy a guy's idea from the early 1800s by writing a book called The Blind Watchmaker. And what he says is natural selection is a blind watchmaker. In other words, he's trying to say that guy's argument isn't true. Blind because it does not see ahead, does not plan consequences, has no purpose in view. Yet the living results of natural selection overwhelmingly to him impress us with appearance of design. Appearance of design. In other words, you might think it's designed, it might look designed in every way, but it's just an illusion. All right? Don't look behind the curtain. You know, that sort of thing. Appearance of design, as if a master watchmaker impress us with the illusion of design and planning. It looks planned, it looks designed, but he's saying it really is not. He goes on in another one to say this. This, he states actually as his mission in life, this next one, right? I want to persuade the reader not just that Darwinian worldview happens to be true, but that it is the only known theory that could, in principle, solve the mystery of our existence. So he doesn't simply want to say, okay, I think evolution went from here to here to here. He wants to destroy anything that's counter to that. That's his mission in life. That's his mission in life. And he goes on to say in another place, Darwin made it possible to be an intellectually fulfilled atheist. Where did he start with his point of view? Did he start with, there must be something that I can latch onto and then have a worldview, and I'm going to check out whether or not a mind came first or matter came first? He automatically, from the beginning, rejected the mind came first theory because he wants to be an intellectually fulfilled atheist. So he destroys, just like, what was the guy, Walt said, that we can't believe this because it goes against our philosophy, that life arose by chance, even though life arose by chance is impossible. Okay, he admits basically in that statement, we did that earlier on in another lesson. He admits basically that there's only two choices, and his choice, being an atheist, is unrealistic because it's impossible, but I choose that because I can't accept the other one. That's exactly what Dawkins is saying here. Okay? It gives me the idea that I can be an atheist and not have to worry about the consequences, is what he's saying. All right? And these are the guys that are cramming it down everybody's throat since Darwin's day. This has been going on actually before Darwin. So it's been going on for quite a while, hundreds of years, 150 plus just since Darwin. And they've coerced the whole world through various means. There's a history to it that would be important and kind of interesting to talk about. That this is the only way that you can accept anymore. He goes on in another spot here and says that in the God Delusion, which is another one of his books, calling God a delusion, Dawkins argues that a supernatural creator like a God almost certainly does not exist. Now notice how he says almost certainly. All right? He defines belief in a personal God as a delusion. But at the same time, and I've heard him say this, okay? Look at the bottom left corner. I am a cultural Christian. Yeah, you should be doing that. Isn't that good? You know why he says I am a cultural Christian? Dawkins identifies as a Christian, and he said that he is glad that Christianity is still around. He says that because he believes because he likes the church architecture, the big buildings, the cathedrals and stuff. He likes the church music. He likes the idea that Christianity is, how can I put this? Christianity gives mankind a way, an excuse to be good to each other rather than, if everything was by chance, if there was no supreme being that set down original rules, if there was no mind in the beginning and there was only matter, then who's to say what's right and wrong? Okay? So he's saying, I like to call myself a cultural Christian because I don't want everybody going around killing themselves or each other or destroying things or robbing banks or raping or anything else. I don't think that's right. But he can't go back and say that it's wrong because there is a creator. Now, we're going to look at this particular, Dawkins is going to be in this next film we're going to watch, and we're going to see this chart. He's going to talk specifically about Doradon, Rhodocetus, and Pakicetus. Pakicetus was one of them that we already looked at. But he goes down here from this creature, and he's going to say that this, and this are transitional forms that go up to the whale. And I think the dolphin is the other one. Mm-hmm. Okay? And so then the second part of this next video is going to show not only why that is wrong, but it's going to talk about the guy that found, I think it's Rhodocetus, and show that he actually embellished and lied about it. Okay? So this one's a little bit longer. It's about 6 minutes.
Darwinism provided an explanation for the appearance of design and argued that there is no design, or, if you will, the designer of natural selection. If that's out of the way, if that just does not explain the evidence, then the flip side of that is, well, things appear designed because they are designed.
But what about the fossil record? Does it reflect a clear line-up progression that moves from land mammals to whales? Let's hear from famous evolutionist Richard Dawkins as he reviews how he thinks the fossils line up to support the evolutionary view.
People often say, where are the intermediate fossils? Show us your intermediate fossils. There are plenty of intermediate fossils, and one of the best examples is whales. Modern whales are up there. Here's a series of fossils. Back in time, Doradon, about 36 million years ago. Rhodocetus, about 47.5 million years. Pakicetus, about 48.5 million years. You can see they form a lovely series of intermediates. As you go from old to young, Pakicetus, Rhodocetus, they're gradually losing the hind legs to Doradon, which has almost lost the hind legs completely. Modern whales have completely lost the hind legs. There are some vestigial bones, some remnant bones buried deep inside the body. A lovely series of intermediates getting progressively more and more specialized in living in the sea.
When it comes to Dawkins' first icon, Artiodactyl, remember that this is just a wide category of even-toed animals, including goats, sheep, camels, pigs, cows, and deer. Other than just saying so, there's no evidence connecting this entire group of animals to whales. By suggesting that whales evolved from some ancient Artiodactyl, evolutionists admit that they do not have a real fossil connecting whales to other mammals. Instead, they reach for an imaginary, not yet found ancestor, and the precise animal that fills this slot depends on which museum you go to. The next in the lineup is Pakicetus. Dr. Gingrich discovered this creature and named it the whale of Pakistan, claiming it was the oldest and most primitive whale yet discovered. This bold statement was based on a few parts of the skull that were found, but they had no fossil evidence below the head. Yet, this did not stop them from illustrating this creature with flipper hands and feet and a swishy fin for a tail on the front cover of Science magazine. Some museums even boldly displayed it with a blowhole way up the snout and paddle-like feet and hands. All this while no fossils of flippers, arm, leg, or lower snout bones had been found. All this changed by 2001, after 4 more partial skulls and 150 additional Pakicetus bones had been discovered, all of which clearly proved that this creature was 100% land animal. Based on these new findings, researchers even said that Pakicetus were good runners, moving with only their digits touching the ground. These new findings led to the conclusion that Pakicetus was no more amphibious than a cave bird, a browsing mammal living today in South America, which is similar to pigs but with longer snouts. Pakicetus models had to be changed to have running legs, hooked feet, and not paddles, a longer neck, eyes on top of its head, and nasal passages were moved from the middle of the snout to the front. Surprisingly, some museums still display the original whale-like Pakicetus, not the 2001 land animal version based on the additional fossil discoveries. Next, we have Rhodhocetus, which is based on a fossil found in Pakistan in 1992 and is now represented by 3 fossil finds. Many textbooks and museums show Rhodhocetus with flippers for feet, a long tail, and a fluke like whales have. Even though they only found a few vertebrae that follow the pelvis, Dr. Gingrich, the paleontologist most responsible for the reconstruction and presentation of Rhodhocetus, added a prominent long tail complete with a whale fluke and flipper feet to the Rhodhocetus display at the Natural History Museum at the University of Michigan. When interviewed about these 3 whale-like features Dr. Gingrich included on Rhodhocetus, you won't believe what he admitted.
When this video series was being filmed on location at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, the executive producer noticed a discrepancy between museum drawings of Rhodhocetus and the fossils. The reconstruction of Rhodhocetus had a whale fluke, but there were no fossils of a tail to confirm this. Dr. Phil Gingrich, the scientist responsible for the discovery and reconstruction of Rhodhocetus, was questioned how he knew there was a whale fluke on Rhodhocetus, since that part of the fossil
This is the
was
actual foot of
The reasoning that the scientists think there was a fluke on Rhodhocetus based on other pieces of anatomy. Well, I told you we don't have the tail in Rhodhocetus, so we don't know for sure whether it had a ball vertebrae indicating a fluke or not. So I speculated it might have had a fluke.
Scientist Gingrich also acknowledged that the flippers were drawn on the diagram without these fossils. Now, he does not believe this animal had flippers. Again, his answer was surprising, since the museum diagrams had flippers on Rhodhocetus.
Now, since then, we've found the forelimbs, the hands, and the front arm, the arms, in other words, of Rhodhocetus. And we understand that it doesn't have the kind of arms that can be spread out like flippers are on the whale. And if you don't have flippers, I don't think you can have a fluke tail at really powered swimming. And so I now doubt that Rhodhocetus would have had a fluke tail.
Do you understand how important this is? How, on the one hand, this guy faked the drawings and admitted later that he doesn't think that it is, and this guy, the face of evolution, still uses it, and the other one, 2 different ones that they know now were not intermediates, and yet he still uses it in his lecture to prove evolution. To prove that there's this intermediate, and 2 of the intermediates aren't intermediates. I looked up online in 2 different ways whether or not Rhodhocetus was a transitional form, whether it was an evolutionary fossil between whales and former ones. 2 different times, and this is what Google AI gave me. The first one said, yes, Rhodhocetus had a robust tail. The tail was likely long and strong and helped Rhodhocetus swim efficiently. That was a Google AI that came up when I did a search. Then I did a different search with a couple of different words, and this is what I came up with and said. According to fossil evidence, Rhodhocetus and early whale species did not possess a tail fluke. AI, Google AI can agree with whether or not it's right or not. And it depends on how you word it as to which one you're going to get. This one says yes, this one said no. It was from the same, I typed both of them on the same computer. This one says that it likely did not have distinctive tail fin characteristics of modern whales. All right? And that is what the guy that found it and drew it said that is true, but the bottom one is what Dawkins says it's true. You're getting a lot of misinformation is what I'm trying to show you, I think. All right? So we look at a guy like Dawkins, says, we come to the resurrection of Jesus, it's so petty, it's so trivial, it's so local, it's so earthly, it's so unworthy of the universe. Do you think he thinks Jesus Christ is the Son of God? I don't think so, right? Faith is one of the world's great evils, comparable to the smallpox virus, but harder to eradicate. And that's his mission in life, to try to eradicate that. And yet, he says, I am a cultural Christian. Oops. 1, 2, 3. These are 3 different versions of the evolution, supposedly evolution from mammals down to whale, up to a whale, that I found on the internet. They're all different, but they all say the same thing, okay? One came from another rather than one came from a tree. This kind came from its own tree, this kind came from its own tree, etc., which is what I think the evidence is showing, and they don't have the proof for it. So, again, it all goes back to this, right? We start with what? What's the first question we got to ask? We ask whether or not I think that the fossils show me and prove to me that there must be evolution happening? No, I don't think so. What do we start with? Was there a mind? Or was there no mind? Which one's more reasonable? And if there was a mind, then there's not a problem with it happening a different way than what evolution is saying. Make sense? All right? So, Darwin has a one tree fits all. Genesis has a one tree of each kind. In other words, Genesis 1:11, let the land produce vegetation after its kind. 1:20, let the waters fill with living things. In other words, all the different kinds of fishes after their kind. No, in other words, not all fish are totally related. There's different kinds of fish also. Let the birds fly above the earth after their own kind, and let the land produce living creatures after their kind. If there's a mind first, this is reasonable. And let us create man in our own image. So, we end with a statement. If we begin with the wrong assumptions, what's an assumption? Something that we want to or think that is true. If we begin with something that's wrong, think back on the policeman and the policeman that got shot, and he ended up that in the end it was his own little pen gun that shot him. But the assumptions at the very beginning were what? That the other guy shot him because he had a criminal record, which he ended up not really having because it was expunged and he didn't even fire that gun. If you start with the wrong assumptions, then you will come to the wrong conclusions. People say, are you anti-science? No, I'm anti-wrong assumptions. But I think you've got the wrong starting place, which leads you to a wrong conclusion. Any questions or comments? All right. You can end here. That's amazing. So let me ask you guys, since this is over for the day, do you like this kind of stuff? Is this okay? Because we're going to start with some other things next week. And we've got some more things that are on the what I call the outside evidence. Before we ever get into the evidences that I find in the Bible that I think show that the Bible is the correct book to be reading. That's another whole study, and we're going to do that after this one. But I got a few more things to do here before we get there. And I hope to see you guys back next week.